Report with Mickie K, Andy Williams, and Lennox Smith.
shine. Out of the ashes we rise. There's no one like you. None like you. Our God is greater. Our God is stronger. God, you are higher than any other. Our God is healer. Awesome in power. Our God. Our God. Our God is greater. Our God is stronger. God, you are higher than any other. Our God is healer. Awesome in power. Our God. Our God. And if our God is for us, then who could ever stop us? And if our God is with us, then what can stand against? And if our God is for us, then who could ever stop us? And if our God is with us, then what can stand against?
The Ground Report with Mikey K, Andy Williams, and Lennox Smith.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Pleasant good morning to all and sundry, East, West, North, South, Central. Our friend Bago, and wherever you are streaming on the World Wide Web, pleasant good day to you. This is, yes, the Monday edition of the Ground Report. I want to say up front and categorically that well, first and foremost, our apology for not being on air in the latter part of last week. But as I would have said on various social media platforms, that was due to circumstances beyond our individual and collective, beyond these controls. And as a consequence, we weren't able to be on. But certainly I want to also further indicate, as I said on that occasion, that there was some developments that would have taken place, and we weren't able, of course, to generate the kind of improvisation that we normally would in order to ensure that the program does not suffer as a consequence of those events. Well, just as Murphy's Law, things happen beyond our control. But of course, it is also said that necessity is the mother of invention. And this morning is no exception. Andy will not be with us this morning. I was waiting for his confirmation as to whether or not to share the information relating to himself. Well, he was, or he is, feeling a bit under the weather, and as a consequence, he has been mandated, he has been instructed to take a rest. And as I've always said, that a human being is not like a motor car, and even that, of course, goes bad sometimes and need a rest or some kind of reviving. And so Andy is only human, and therefore one expects that in the fullness of time, he will recuperate in a way that he can do justice to the program on a daily basis as he normally would do. I want to say on behalf of the rest of us, and I'm sure that when you have the opportunity to call, you will, of course, express your own, let's say, wishes or best wishes for a speedy recovery and a return. So I want to tell Andy as well, yes, we here in the sub studio, so to speak, Mikey, myself, of course, and family, wishes him, of course, a speedy recovery. I'm hoping that the week will not finish before we hear him or see him again on the program. But he have been given his instructions, and one has to respect that because the greater good really is that he can be up to par, to be at his optimum, to deliver to you. So many of you who, of course, have phoned me insistently last week asking about the program, asking about Andy. And I want to tell you, at this point in time, he was recovering from some rest that he has to get, and he has undertaken some tests and all of that to make sure that his health is where it ought to be for a program that is as dynamic, as hectic, and as versatile as the ground report has always been. So that being as it may, I want to tell you one time that the line is open, but only for today, and maybe the rest of the week in terms of WhatsApp calls only. In terms of your voicemails and so on, we will have the normal format. It's just that I will not be engaged, of course, in the very elaborate and meticulous acknowledgements that Andy is so well known for. So I will simply say welcome in Trinidad, of course, East, West, North, South, Central, our friends in Tobago, and wherever you are, streaming on the World Wide Web, a pleasant good day to you. Yes, this is the ground report. The WhatsApp number to call to leave a WhatsApp message, not the usual one, not the one that you see it flashing across the street, the screen, but this one, 326 4450. 236 4450. Take a note, write it down, commit it to memory. But that is the WhatsApp number to call if you wish to leave a WhatsApp message, voice note, so to speak, in order to have it aired during the course of the day. Let me also thank the director of course, the technical director for responding to our call. And as you know, Andy is situated in what we call master control. And without master control, none of us, neither Mikey nor myself, will be able to share our views or be with you, or you be with us on a daily basis on the ground report. I want to say as well, take the opportunity to thank all those persons who have, of course, made calls and, of course, give a certain amount of acceptance and agreement of the new format of the corridor transformation, which was aired last night as usual, and of course would not have been on air on Friday, but Sunday and Saturday and Sunday, which was last night, and then of course we are back on tonight. So that being as it with the same format where we have a children's session or children's segment, and then we go into big people, raw and unadulterated material. Let me put it that way. So once again, the WhatsApp number to call on this day, 326 4450, 326 4450, 326 4450 is the WhatsApp number. Leave a message there, and our technical director will, of course, share that at the appropriate time. I hope that I have an interaction with the director, because from time to time I may have to ask, is there a call?
WhatsApp message or voice call on my phone.
Right, so that is 326 4450, right?
On that number, yeah. 326 4450.
Right, beautiful. Right, yeah, I want to hear a voice to the mystery man. Let me put it that way.
Voice note or call, face. Right? Mr. Smith?
Is what?
I say voice note or call.
Pardon me? Let me hear.
I I say voice note or calls on 326-4450.
Oh, okay. So you can take a call as well. All right. So people, we have a more what I consider be flexible number this time around. But where this is number 326-4450. You can have your normal calls as well on that. Normally we'll have a special that will be reserved for only voice note under normal circumstance. Of course, the other numbers are still active, and I hope that I am correct in that regard. 225-6644, 225-6644, and the other number to get us at is 239-5120, 239-5120. So those are the numbers. They are flashing across.
Correct.
Oh no, I'm not. They're not seeing it on. Yeah, it is. It is there on the corridor, on the ground report. Ad, but of course the one that is just below me in green, flashing across my screen. Well, that is where to get me on the corridor. I think I better take it off to avoid confusion. So let me just do that so that we don't have the confusion of having to call my number and get me here in office when in fact this is not the corridor transformation, it is the ground report. So let me just do that. Right, so I think that has been achieved. So you will see it coming to you. Right, so we have done that and it will come to you momentarily. Let me just shift the little chair here. All right, that being as it may, let's get on to business. Welcome once again. It's a new week, of course. Quite a lot of information to assess, quite a number of information to look at, and of course, the most important, I think, on the national scale is the presentation by the Honorable Prime Minister at the United Nations last week, where, of course, she gave not just a scintillating, but a very downright, frank, pragmatic address to the United Nations. So much so that global forum that looks at the achievements of leaders in the diaspora. There is an overwhelming consensus that Kamala Persad should be given that award in 2025, and that is in fact so. It has been recognized. And of course, she beat back people like Mayor Motley and of course Ralph Gonzalez in St. Vincent. So Trinidad and Tobago is again making its presence felt on the world stage. I don't think Dr. Rowley got such an award. I may be wrong, but those persons who are in the know more than me, you can of course confirm or deny whether or not Dr. Rowley got a global award, whilst he was, of course, that particular award, whilst he was in office between 2015 and, of course, the latter part of and just before the calling of the elections this year. Elections having been called on the 28th of April and was executed, where, of course, the PNM was handsomely defeated. And put another way, the UNC and its coalition partners or coalition of interest overwhelmed with 26 of the 39 seats in Trinidad. So that being as it may, let us go straight to some other matters. But the other matters, of course, associated with that presentation, because we have to look at some of the aspects of the presentation that was made. What came out to me poignantly in my face, and I suppose you as well, is that she said in uncertain terms and consistent, even though, of course, Amy Brown, a former minister, who I consider to be disingenuous, and I don't want to say dishonest because I don't want to in any way interfere potentially with any tax regulation that may be the consequence of telling somebody that they are a downright cheater, downright liar. When, of course, he said that the statement made by Kamala Prasad Bisesa on the question of support for the Americans was inconsistent, and for him does not augur well for Caribbean or CARICOM unity. Well, of course, she said it on certain terms in her presentation, that if it is that you want to see the Caribbean as the notion of wanting to see the Caribbean as a zone of peace, that is elusive. That is a figment of a person's imagination, not wanting to face the realities. And of course, I was particularly pleased with the presentation of the Jamaican Prime Minister, who essentially spoke along the lines of our Prime Minister. But of course, you had Gonzalez, the Prime Minister of St. Vincent, and that of Barbados, Mayor Muttley, speaking about the zone of peace idea, without, of course, making reference, even though in the past, and troubling as this situation is to their respective countries, are talking about crime and criminality, and the role that the drugs and, of course, guns and ammunition play in the burgeoning or spiraling almost out of control, and the deployment of scarce resources to this particular social issue. I'm talking about crime and criminality, gang warfare, etc. And then, of course, as if to make certain that her point will be forcefully accepted by the world body responsible for the assembly of world leaders in New York at the United Nations. She then, of course, made reference to Haiti, not in the usual context, which we all know that, of course, it is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, but also we know of the historical antecedent that has created that, colonial and otherwise. But the fact is that that place is over, should I say, oversaturated with, of course, gang activities, to the point where they are the ones that are in charge of that society, that country. Much bigger than Trinidad and Tobago, but the gangs and the gang leaders are in charge. And therefore, in making her presentation with respect, of course, and in support of the present American administration and the president, are talking about Donald Trump's actions in the Southern Caribbean against the drug cartels, and therefore that in itself suggests that these are gangs that are wreaking havoc in the Caribbean community, small island states such as Trinidad and Tobago, and the very St. Vincent and Barbados and Jamaica. Here it is, there are some leaders who would prefer to throw a blind eye to that for reason we can speculate, but in the realm of common sense and rationality and history. But we're not going to go there, because they did not say it is that, except that they are of the illusionary disposition that the area, that the region must be a zone of peace, suggesting no war, but and really suggesting as well that the Americans ought not to engage in the way that they have, while at the same time, ironically, just as Trinidad and Tobago, they too are benefiting from the lack of operation, lack of activities of the drug cartels that emanates from South America in particular. People could say what they want, that of course the Americans ought not to do what they are doing, because most of the drugs come from the Pacific side and not of the Caribbean Atlantic side, and therefore there is another agenda that the Americans are pursuing, that is not our business. And I want to tell the Prime Minister that in spite of the MSJ's statement of what I consider to be the usual obscurantist nature, where they will oppose to anything once, of course, Kamala Prasad Bisesa says it, or the UNC or the coalition of interest, they haven't, of course, worked themselves out of any runnings of the country called Trinidad and Tobago. I want to say this, be dismissive. In fact, I want to say that my party has already drafted a letter in response to the statements made by the MSJ. Of course, whilst they were attacking and they are opposed to the position of the Prime Minister, and therefore the country of Trinidad and Tobago, for which she won an handsome elections and have been given a mandate. They suddenly want, without being elected, to make statements that are contradictory and contrary to the statements that would have been made by the titular and the existential Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Mrs. Kamala Prasad Bisesa. Let us dismiss these, what I consider to be offensive and obscurantist elements that really and truly doesn't have Trinidad and Tobago at. Why am I saying that? I am saying that simply because, and the line is open, people. We will take your calls. The director will tell me if you are ready. I'm not going to belabor any particular point because God knows, we too miss you over the ending of the last week, and of course, this is the first opportunity we have to interact after, for some, the loss of their cup of coffee, some people say, on mornings, temporarily, of course. But I want to say that Kamala Prasad Bisesa has acted in Trinidad and Tobago's interests. That's the point I am making. So that when the Americans come down south, whether they should go into the Pacific Ocean is irrelevant to us and our interests, because it means, therefore, you do not have to employ our marine assets, the Coast Guard, our law enforcement agencies, and so on. Less money has to be put into that because they have been engaged in an activity that we are vicariously benefiting from, meaning that we cannot secure our borders. We have not been able to do so 100%. Neither, of course, as complained by these prime ministers and these governments, whether it's St. Vincent, St. Lucia, Dominica, Barbados, Jamaica, they have not been able to do so, but the actions of the Americans will certainly vicariously or indirectly benefit us, and therefore that is what is called a symbiotic relationship or a symbiotic event, meaning that it exists for our mutual benefit, so that there is less drugs remaining or passing through Trinidad and Tobago's waters, and there will be less, of course, guns and ammunition staying in Trinidad and Tobago, so that it will now become difficult for those who are engaged in criminal conduct, whether they are gangs or otherwise, to engage in their nefarious, harmful impact on the society called Trinidad and Tobago. And indeed, I want to say, if they refuse to say it and acknowledge it, that the benefits will also be derived from that action to the Vincentian people, the St. Lucian people, the Barbadian people, and the Jamaican people, and every single English-speaking Caribbean country that is either part or partially part of CARICOM. So let us not waste time. That's saving us a lot of monies that we do not have. And I'm sure I would see part of that benefit being reflected in the budget to come. Some say that the government will I understand that the announcement will be made today, but some speculated it will be around the 6th because of the legal constraints or time frame in which a budget must be presented in Trinidad and Tobago. But that being as it may, the fact is that we don't have to. Yes, there are fallout as everything else. Fishermen are reluctant, if you want to call it in some instance. They are hesitant. They have a sense of trepidation, fright to go out there and ply their trade. But so far, I'm very thankful that that has not had any impact. The presence of the Americans and what they have done so far have not impacted, of course, on the price of fish generally in the marketplace and therefore to the consumers, which of course is a good thing because, of course, naturally, as human beings, and having regard to the proximity of the American military assets in the Southern Caribbean, and having regard to the fact that they are prepared, of course, to deploy their weaponry in order to destroy boats that are loaded with contraband, and in this case, of course, that poison that normally would be directed to the United States. And we have had enough information to suggest, and let me say this, it is a frivolous, it is a ignorant, and ignorant here means lack of knowledge. And by people who either would have informed themselves but wanted to mislead, or people who may not be informed and therefore they make statements such as those fishermen who, of course, ply their trade in the pirogues and so on around Trinidad and Tobago will be targeted. No, it doesn't happen like that. The American Navy and the Army is probably one of the best in the world. They have all the technology, second to none in the world. And therefore, I would advise those who are, including, of course, the fishermen, the fisherfolk, to do not be perturbed, because the technology that is being deployed, if you have nothing to hide, if you have no contraband of the type that is on your vessel that the Americans are in search of and want to eliminate from this region, emanating from the cartels or elsewhere in South America, you have nothing to fear. You see, because they have listening devices that will, of course, listen to the conversations. They have listening devices that would make certain that whatever language they are speaking on whatever vessel that is carrying that particular poison or set of poison, whether it's cocaine, whether it's marijuana, whether it's amphetamines, etc., they will know because they have the technology. So they have not targeted these vessels by accident. I'm sure that whilst that was happening, especially in the first instance, that there were many other vessels there, but their technology was able to zero in. And those of you who are familiar, as I have made myself to study what are the elements, the ingredients that will cause a particular boat to be blown up by the United States. It's very complicated. There's several levels of security, what I consider to be standards that you have to go through in order for a decision to be made to engage in that way. So it is not by accident. There is a surveillance flying objects, let me put it that way. You have your drones. You have information by way of satellites. you have information beaming back to the United States in wherever the headquarters is located, to make certain they could see in the night as well as in the day. They could see as good in the night as they could see in the day. So if you're fishing in the night genuinely, or you're fishing in the day, they are going to know if you have narcotics or contraband of the type that they believe they have a duty and responsibility to protect their citizens from back in the United States. They will deploy, and therefore it will be an eclectic, selective utilizing or deploying all of that technology. So do not be too perturbed by those whose agenda is one that speaks to a zone of peace, when in fact, as the Prime Minister has said, we are really have been over many decades now, been battling with a war that killed our people in various dimensions and manifestations, whether it's the drugs itself, whether it's the byproduct, meaning that the guns that we do not produce here and ammunition that we do not produce here remaining here, getting in the hands of what I consider to be unscrupulous and nefarious elements who do not want to, of course, conform to the rules and the rule of law, and engage, whether it be in the form of home invasions, or whether in the form of robberies, whether in the form of kidnappings, etc. And we have had, God knows, too much of that not to be appreciative of the efforts of the United States in these parts. And as I said, vicariously, we are able to benefit from it. Otherwise, we would have to deploy the financial and marine and military and law enforcement assets with very scarce these days financial resources. And even if it was not scarce, if we are benefiting from such a deployment of the Americans, you may want to say, I would go as far as to say, parasitically want to live off the efforts of the United States in these parts, in terms of getting rid of that curse that is, of course, the drug cartels and the poison that they produce on its way to the United States ostensibly, but we still benefit, or should I say benefit? No, we still have the repercussions here. Then, of course, I say to Kamala Prasad-Bissessar, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. I thought it was important, of course, to raise that issue because it is a topical issue. It will be one in the Caribbean, and there are different sides of the argument. But what you cannot, of course, obfuscate, what you cannot avoid, is the fact that action indirectly and directly benefits Trinidad and Tobago, having regard to the scourge. Remember, she said in some term that over 25 years, the number of persons that would have expired as a consequence of murders in this country equates to about 1% of Trinidad and Tobago's population. She said all of that. Who in the right mind as Trinbagonians would want to, of course, argue with a position where this could be drastically be reduced, the numbers of murders by the actions of Americans? Cannot be said. It has to be someone who is unpatriotic and who doesn't understand what is happening, and therefore acting in the best interest of Trinidad and Tobago is the Prime Minister's number one priority. I heard, of course, the former Prime Minister probably talking some what I consider to be some higgledy-piggledy talk, some square peg and round hole talk, some kind of gibberish about the position of the area being a zone of peace and so on. None of them who are arguing in that space, in that area, have attached themselves to the elephant in the discussion or in the dialogue atmosphere as to what is actually happening on the ground in Venezuela, and the consequence of which has repercussions not just for the immediate neighbors of the Venezuelans, whether it be Guyana, or whether it be Colombia, whether it be Brazil, whether it be Argentina, whether it be Chile, whether it be Peru, whether it be all of the other neighbors that form the South American continent. None of them have spoken of the concern with respect, of course, to the undermining and the non-delivery or the non-presence of the democratic process that the Maduro administration claim, but in practice engage, of course, in dictatorial and autocratic action as they seize, they commandeer the apparatus of state, something that Rowley tried between 2015 and the 28th of April this year. Seize the apparatus of government, and therefore, of course, engage in what is called autocratic rule. Yeah, that's what has happened. And more significantly, because of the ruining of the economy, there are those who said, well, look, America caused it. That is irrelevant to Trinidad and Tobago, because we are suffering from the migration out of Venezuela of over 7 million people of the 27 million population of Venezuela. And it is irrelevant if one Venezuelan is here. One, but we know about is about 100,000. We see them too frequently not to be that naive to say it's about 40-something thousand, as Rowley and they would have tried to insult us with. But the fact of the matter is that they are consuming limited resources that we have, utilizing our hospital, utilizing indirectly the huge food import bill that requires the use, deployment, acquisition of foreign exchange, $46 billion in import, when a tin of sardine that we do not produce here, or a tin of corned beef that we do not produce here, or even sugar, rice, or flour. We produce the flour, but we do not produce the raw material for it, the wheat. That comes from other countries. So therefore, when they are here, they consume that. If we have less than that, 100,000 here, it means therefore what we import with scarce foreign exchange will last a little longer in the 1 year. And I want to also say, by extension, if circumstances would have improved in Venezuela, if they would get and realize their true potential as an economic giant in this part of the world, because they have the largest deposit, arguably more than that of Saudi Arabia, and therefore, oil, even though, of course, it is considered to be heavy crude, but difficult, of course, to refine. But the fact of the matter is that they are. And if they are able to do that, maybe Trinbagonians will want to gravitate there and not the reverse, as is the case now, utilizing, of course, our very scarce and dwindling foreign exchange understand the repercussions. So those persons who are against the Prime Minister and saying that somehow she doesn't understand what she is doing, I say that is an exercise in futility, and it is wishful thinking on the part of those. And even worse, is an exercise in ignorance of the highest degree. Ignorance of the highest degree. If they really are genuine about their incongruent analysis, a total antithesis as to what the reality is and the impact of the Venezuelan society and the administration there on Trinidad and Tobago. And therefore, she must be given kudos, and that global organization, I wanted to put it next to my picture here to let people appreciate what we are talking about. But they see what the average Trinbagonian would have seen. They understand that Trinidad and Tobago's best interest was being sought by the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago current, and one can of course make the comparison with that of her immediate predecessors. I say her immediate predecessors. I'm talking about Rowley, and I'm talking about ephemeral or temporary as it was. I'm talking about Sturgeon. And I don't have to argue that generally speaking, they acted out of the interests of Trinidad and Tobago, outside the interests of Trinidad and Tobago, even at the risk, if they had to, like Kamala Prasad Bisesa has done, of offending or taking a different view from that of some of their CARICOM partners. I want to tell you this, however. All the talk they're talking. Guyana has not taken that position. In fact, it is clear by their conduct. They are thanking Trinidad and Tobago for the stance that they would have that we would have taken. Again, that in itself is benefit to Trinidad and Tobago. Guyana is the fastest in the world. I'm talking about it. Fastest advancing, developing economy. 7 and 8% growth. We can hardly reach 1%. And because of the asset that they possess, both in terms of what is in the ground, and of course the vast expanse of land, and because we are close to them as we are closer to Venezuela, not of course comparatively speaking, not in similar distance, but certainly Guyana a little distance away, but nonetheless, because of their advancing economy with a rapidity precedented just about a decade or two ago, it is in Trinidad and Tobago's interest to see Guyana's interest as well. But Trinidad and Tobago seeking Guyana's interest is not by chance or accident. It is a construct created by the Maduro administration. Understand that? And the rest of the CARICOM, who are talking about a zone of peace, notice that they are definitely silent with respect to statement made about Guyana and its a predicament with Venezuela. Notice that. Notice nobody comment except to make the broad amorphous stupid, wild, and what I consider to be ocious or irrelevant statement that somehow, Trinidad and Tobago is breaching the concept of making the region a zone of peace. That's all they're saying. But notice, Trinidad and Tobago also made a very categorical statement when the Prime Minister, right here in Trinidad, not at the UN demonstrates a consistency. She said it here, and she went up to the UN and said the same thing. Amy Brown is saying that it is inconsistent. I don't know where they went to school, but that's a different story. But the fact of the matter is that here it is when all efforts were being made to settle the matter of the Essequibo region, 2/3 of Guyana, with that of Venezuela, International Court, the Argyle Declaration in St. Vincent, all of that. The Venezuelan administration, its military assets, were making bellicose and threatening language to the Guyanese. Yes, in spite of those interventions. And you're telling me that the rest of CARICOM don't know that? But no, they remain definitely silent on those matters. And what they have done? Try to somehow generate a square peg and round hole argument that Kamala Persad-Bissessar, when she said that if Venezuela goes into Guyana's territory, inclusive of the Essequibo, Trinidad and Tobago will allow, once they ask the United States to launch whatever repulsion that is required, whatever counter action that is required, so that the Venezuelans get the hell out of Guyana. That is what she said. But you notice nobody, whether it's João Gonzalez, whether it's the Barbadian Prime Minister and so on, whether it's our own former Prime Ministers, have broached that issue. And why they cannot broach that issue, frankly, and that is because of the flawed concept that the place must remain a zone of peace. That is amorphous. But more practically, they cannot, because they will be seen as, of course, supporting the belligerent against a member state of CARICOM, which is Guyana. Well done, Kamala Persad-Bissessar. You have to give the woman credit, man. Let us not waste time with people who are that dense, obtuse, and total ignorance as to the geopolitical and hemispheric imperatives. She has put the CARICOM in a place where they simply have to remain dormant, silent, and look stupid by that one statement. What they gonna say? What they gonna say? That Venezuela did not make those bellicose projections across the border into that of Guyana as the bellicose verbalization. I didn't say physical action. I didn't say that they put troops there. But should, in case they do materialize those verbal threats, that kind of belligerent language, Trinidad and Tobago will welcome, once they ask for it, the presence of the American assets in order to repel any incursion into fellow CARICOM state, Guyana. How they could respond? They can't respond. They can't respond. And I have a difficulty, of course, with our Caribbean journalists as well. You see, why is it they would project the zone of peace, what I consider to be amorphous, illusion? They have not been questioning these leaders on that issue with a high degree of specificity and zeroing in on what is their position based on the statement of defending Guyana and its territory, the Essequibo, made by our Prime Minister in that regard. And that is why she had to say that CARICOM is already fractured. Why do you think she's saying that? You and I, when we apply our God-given common sense, we know that's what she means. Because they have not been able to respond to that specific statement, which, on the one hand, suggests that Venezuela is prepared, or by their conduct and their utterances, are prepared to breach the concept of a zone of peace, having regard to all of the antecedents, including, of course, engaging in the International Court and the Argyle arrangement in St. Vincent. Yeah, they can't. And I want people to understand, and those are some of the variables and factors and elements you must now look for while they try to condemn unmeritoriously and without justification the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago on these matters. They cannot. And that is why I said that I cannot overemphasize what I consider to be probably the complicity of the regional journalistic fraternity in not interrogating regional leaders who seem to believe that somehow the statements coming out of Port of Spain and that therefore the leadership of Trinidad and Tobago and therefore the government, that it is fracturing a unity in itself, is elusive and amorphous. Elusive and amorphous. Let us not waste time. I trust that kind of analysis will benefit, of course, all and such. And I would love to hear your own responses. I have not gotten a call from the director as yet in terms of calls. Remember the numbers to call. Right now, you can get me at. I know that some of you are maybe preparing your voice notes, but don't forget the voice note. Voice note will be noted on the following number. A new number, only for the little period that Andy is not here. And don't forget, of course, Andy is a bit under the weather and he's recuperating. And therefore, yours truly, as typical Boy Scouts, so we are here for any weather, every weather, on all occasions. So we are going to, of course, have a program irregardless. The number to call, of course, to give your voice notes are 326, let me repeat, 236-4450, 236-4450. From what I have gleaned, that the technical director that is substituting today, that seems to be, he has access to that number. So once again, 326-4450, 326-4450, that's the number to call, and you can call on it as well. He will inform me as to whether or not someone is on the line. And then, of course, you have the regular numbers for the regular people who have committed this to memory. 225-6644.
You have a caller on the line, please?
Oh, we have a caller? Thank you very much. Go ahead, caller.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Lennox. Hello, Lennox, you hear me? Hello. Lennox. Hello, Lennox. Lennox. Hello. Lennox.
Go ahead, caller. Go ahead.
All right, Lennox, what I want to say.
Delay in the studio. So
All right,
you go ahead.
what I wanted to say, that is why Kamala mentioned those other CARICOM countries, they are not close as we are. So they can afford to talk so. You understand, Lennox? And what I believe is that somehow they're jealous Ghana because Ghana is prospering now. So they want to kind of glad what's taking place. That's to me, that's how I feel. But Kamala said they are not as close as we are, so they are not in a position to make a decision as she did. Thank you.
Okay, Lennox, you could go ahead. Hello, Lennox, you could go ahead.
Yes, you would forgive me. The system we have, I have an additional system that generates a delay, so that if he is saying Lennox a day, etc., I may not hear him until a few seconds after. So what I would prefer that if you're making your contribution, make your calls, make your contribution, and go straight into it. Don't try not to engage me. I will hear a little while after, and I'll be able, of course, to make some kind of appropriate response. So listening to you as on another system that would generate the delay. I had to come up with that because I wasn't hearing directly from the system we have grown accustomed to directly, even when I have on the headphone. All right. So I just want to make that clear so that you go ahead and speak and make your point, and then I will, of course, engage. Is there another call?
No, you go ahead.
Okay. Yes, indeed. I heard a little bit of what he would have said, so I don't want to hazard any guess, and I don't want to in any way be caught off guard, so to speak, as to misrepresent what he would have said. But let's go to some other issues that are making the news. Of course, Kerr resigns over a handling of a mother's death. Well, of course, as you know, there is this police officer who is totally disgruntled about the way that the police, his colleagues, handled a suicide situation that they have concluded. Of course, he went to the Cedrus police station where he apparently was assigned and delivered his badge and said that his resignation letter will be coming in short order. Of course, I'm criticizing his colleague because he believes sincerely that was not a suicide. He knows his mother more than and better than anybody else, and she would not have taken her life in the way that it was alleged to be done by, of course, objective observation, which, of course, police inquiry is all about. Um, so I understand that there is, of course, a rethinking of the position as far as the police and that investigation is concerned, and they seem to be reopening that file in order to see whether or not what he would have indicated, if there was any veracity or any truth in it by virtue of the investigation. All right, the local government chairman denies receiving property tax funds. We got nothing. I seem to recall that Siwat Singh, the current Minister of Planning and a Minister in the Ministry of Finance.
Okay, go ahead, caller on the line.
Oh, we have a caller? Go ahead, caller.
Yeah, good morning, Lennox. Good morning. I'm the director there.
Good morning, go ahead.
Yeah, and yeah, I hope you feel better. Lennox, I was so very proud when I saw my Prime Minister at the United Nations meeting there on whatever day it was, you understand? She stood up there like a real Prime Minister, a real professional, a woman that is capable of running a country, you understand? And I was so fed up at these CARICOM people that, you know, they remind me in the days when they used to call all the way down here small islanders, you understand? As if we are people from the small island with no sense, with no intelligence, with no knowledge of what's going on the world over, you understand? They sounded very, very, very backward, you understand? We are small, but we are up to date with everything that is taking place the world over, you understand? And this zone of peace and area of peace and peace thing that them going up the United Nations Assembly I'm talking about. They have to understand, yes, we are the CARICOM, but everybody's in their own area, right? They can talk for Dominica, they can talk for Barbados, they can talk for St. Vincent, you understand? Kamala Prasad, the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, she is talking on behalf of Trinidad and Tobago and the people of Trinidad and Tobago, you understand? And as she told them, here ain't no zone of peace when in 2024, 630 something people were murdered. And when you add to that, the rest that was murdered for the past 9.5 to 10 years, it run into thousands of people that lost their lives. Is that a zone of peace? Is that a zone of peace? All who listen and talking stubbornness, them still alive to talk dotishness. Their families still alive to talk stubbornness. So they don't care. You understand? Now we get a Prime Minister with belly, with guts, with intelligence, with what it takes to fix it. You understand? She's not a shooing, beating around the bush Prime Minister. She calls a spade, straight and direct. And that is what a lot of them don't want. This is no time for games. We had enough time for games. It is serious business. We have a country here, or I don't know whatever you want to call it, that has to be fixed. You understand? And the way it can be fixed is not by sitting down and beating around bush, it's like by being straightforward, right? And now the opportunities has arrived that we are going to get, you know, sort of get things, deal with the gangs and deal with whatever to try to fix this place. We are not going to sit down like these CARICOM people and pretend. So, once again, well done, well said, Madam Prime Minister. You keep up the good work. And all who want to criticize and condemn and find fault, that is their business, you understand? Too much talk. Now it's time for action, and with the help of God, things will be fixed. Well done, well done. You made us here, at least the sensible, intelligent, ambitious people in Trinidad, you made us proud. The haters, they will continue to be haters, you understand? But we want this place fixed, and we know we cannot do it alone. We cannot do it alone. So whoever will help us to make this country the country that we want it to be, we thank them, and Madam Prime Minister, you keep on being strong. You keep on talking and saying what is right and what is truth. Blessings, guys, and Lennox, you keep up the program, and we get well soon. And to all the beautiful people on the ground with us, have a blessed day. Bye.
Yeah, you could go ahead, Lennox.
Yes, indeed. Well, I heard all of what the caller would have said. What happened? Like the camera gone. All right. Well, I'll talk in the meeting. No, I'm all right. Yes, indeed. But of course, the caller is correct. I mean, and of course, she echoed what I generally said earlier, and it shows that the level of intelligence of the callers, and I've been saying that, especially when I remain silent for lengthy periods of the program. I probably because of the teaching background that I come from. You listen and listen and listen, and at the end of the day, you are able to make decisions if, of course, that is one of the objectives. But the fact of the matter is that there are people who are very, very familiar and have been read, they have read, they have analyzed, and they understand the complexities and the intricacies of local as well as regional, hemispheric, and more importantly, of course, the different or diverse positions of members of CARICOM. And therefore, she was correct. You're quite right, caller, Miss Woodbrook in particular in this case, that, of course, she called a spade a spade. And people wouldn't like that. They prefer to be live in a state of illusion and, of course, maybe lie to themselves. I like to call it manic depressive psychosis, where, of course, people are simply spontaneously attracted to that which does not exist. Yes, manic depressive psychosis, that's what it has to be. And of course, there's a massive case in the case, of course, of our leaders in the Caribbean. But I want to say that I understand as well their position, because of course they have benefited, those smaller islands in particular, to Caribbean, to Petro Caribbean, where of course they got at a very concessionary prices and sometimes free of charge, considering their debt situation. They were given, of course, started with, of course, Hugo Chavez, the predecessor, the immediate predecessor to the current president there. So we understand that. But it cannot be that you are going to betray your whole family. And the family here means your own country because of some nostalgic construct. Nostalgic, meaning that in the past, construct that will no longer exist, and you have to think in the interest of your people. I would have loved to see a CARICOM that stands firmly behind Guyana, because I think in doing so, they would, of course, like Trinidad and Tobago, to secure a better relationship with Guyana, because Guyana is now, could be considered to be potentially, at least, the country that could provide maybe a parallel, if not exactly, Caribbean, Petro-Caribbean arrangements sometime in the future, because of the vast amount of oil that was discovered there. By the end of this year, they're expecting to be extracting upwards of 1 million barrels a day. That is tremendous. And no country in the Caribbean, especially where Guyana is a member of CARICOM. So they are closer to Guyana, and Guyana, vice versa, is closest to them than anybody else. Why would you remain silent? And why would you criticize the present Prime Minister for seeking Trinidad and Tobago's interest in that very same regard? Is it that they want Trinidad and Tobago to speak for them? Why they handsy-pantsy with a dictator who has caused, of course, some 7 million of his people to leave there and created havoc not only for Trinidad, but the other Caribbean countries as well. But that being as it may, local government chairman denies receiving property tax funds. We got nothing. But of course, Sir Singh, the Minister of Planning and Minister in the Ministry of Finance, did make reference to that, I think, in a question time situation or scenario. But I cannot, and I may have to abreast myself, but I cannot recall that him saying directly that these corporations received the monies that were collected. I know that he said that the monies were collected from property tax, the short-lived period that it had so to do, right, with the present arrangement. They didn't have, of course, the Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority. The same Inland Revenue, the Board of Inland Revenue employees, is they who collected it in the various offices across the country, right? What he did, I know that he did say that from which regions, because of course, if you're paying property tax, it's clear that for administrative purposes, you will have to say where you are located, and therefore, in that regard, it will be easy to extrapolate in what regional influence corporation, if you want to call it that, that would be that the tax would have come from. Who are the Burgesses? The Burgesses that would be in these areas. So that is easy. But to equate that, as I said, I have to refamiliarize myself with the statement that he would have made. But to suggest that he said that they got the actual taxes, I am in some doubt. And those of you who are more schooled than us, because we don't claim to be the repository and have a monopoly on all information and knowledge. So I want to make it clear, so that if you have information that he said that they got the money, the regional corporations where the money was collected from, they got the money, I would love to hear from you. Otherwise, I would have to, of course, read again to see whether or not the claims that are being made by the various chairmen, and indeed, and those claims are from where? Well, obviously, the usual suspect, the PNM regional corporations chairman. All right? So therefore, when them speak anything PNM, of course, you have to take it not just with a pinch, not just a spoonful, but with a truckload of salt, because they always do something to try to, of course, gain some elusive political advantage. Of course, the lines are open. We continue, of course, to take your calls. The numbers to call, 225-6644, 225-6644, and the other one, the 239-5120, 239-5120. Remember, as well, we have a new number. Take note of it. A new number for those persons who may have just joined us. No, Andy is not well, and I'm sure you wouldn't want an Andy that is not well to be on the program, as he normally would give all of himself when he is, of course, before that mic, some say, and before that camera. And you don't want him to have a permanent stay off camera or off the mic. So please give him some time to recuperate. He will be back. And of course, in the meantime, we have a program, and you can, of course, call in as per usual to express your own concerns. And that's that number, as I said, to express your voicemails only. And of course, you can call on it as well. The director has indicated to me. 326-4450. 326-4450. Let me repeat that. 326-4450 to give your voice calls or your voicemails. Director, if you have voicemails and you want to share it with the audience, I have no difficulty at this point in time as I go through.
Line here, please, John.
Pardon me? Go ahead.
Hello, good morning.
I didn't hear you. Oh, go ahead, caller. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Yes, hello, good morning. Andy, Mickie, Lennox, Trinidad and Tobago Central here. Pleasant, good morning. Andy, yes, you are being missed from the program. We pray for a speedy recovery for you. And Lennox, we had missed you guys tremendously. The whole of last week, I thought was some kind of chaos take place. I tell you all are like our breakfast in the morning. I feel like I couldn't function. I say, but what really going on here, boy? After all this drama and hard fight, no more wrong report. Nah, something had to be wrong. But nevertheless, I've been trying calling to find out what's happening. I didn't gotten through, but I said that by today, we should know something taking place. But thank God you all are back. And yes, everybody deserves a little time off, you know, because you all have gone from beginning to end and beyond. You understand? So Trinidad and Tobago have to understand that you all are only human beings just like us. But we must always say thank God for your three angels for always standing for the right thing in this country to help solve the issues after from the last wicked, cold-hearted, you know, corrupted administration. They are no longer there. They have been buried, rotten, and forgotten in this country. And going forward, we deal with goodness and looking to restore back goodness. So we must say to our great political leader, our prime minister, our mother of the nation, thank you, ma'am, for reaching so far in dealing with the people business. So far, so good. And may God continue to bless you and all the ministers and them of doing this right justice to the people of this nation. Because when I'm telling you, Lennox Smith, people, I looking at the comments on social media, people said I have never known to themselves. Now I'm telling you about hardcore supporters of the past administration, which was PNM. And they understand fully what our Prime Minister is doing for this nation. What it is she's seeing about the people, her people in this country, her business in dealing with the people. And this is what we call good governance. This is what we call good leadership. This is what we call a Prime Minister of a nation. You hear what I'm saying, Trinidad and Tobago? This is all that we have ever wanted and dream of having a right leader in the right place to deal with the people business. Everybody will see what they need to get in due course. You understand what I'm saying, Trinidad and Tobago? Everything will happen in a magic one. Everything takes time, and just be a little patient, as they say. You understand? Good thing come to those who wait. You understand what I'm saying? And Lennox Smith concerned about this young man who had lost his mother in this dramatic way. It is very, very sad. And he did a right thing too. Because I'm telling you, something definitely has been wrong with the services in this country. This has nothing to do directly with the government. Right? This is have to do with the people and them in position in high places like, you know, in these military places and whatnot. Because just after yesterday, Trinidad and Tobago, I'm looking on our social media, a video on social media, where a soldier person, I believe he said he's on some leave or some kind of thing, so he was speaking out about the amount of atrophy taking place inside the defense force. He said, try and not to, how I should say then, Lennox Smith. He said, so they don't to try to disturb him, because the amount of things that he has to expose. And I tell you all, it's a lot of fight on concerning these type of position and these jobs and them. You understand what I'm saying? And apparently, like the authorities who is senior more than them, like they're not doing anything about it, because people who in there is speaking out about it. You understand? So we don't know what best our minister or our government could do by hearing these defense force workers and them, however you want to call them, soldiers or army or police, turnkey, whatever it is. You know, they are still human beings at the end of the day. Right? What I'm trying to say is that people just need to take time and listen to the cry out of these staff and them in these places and them, because at the end of the day, they're trying their utmost best as well too. But the ones who are above them, is their whole different chaosness. And it's really good to be hearing their cries out, because at the end of the day, they're the ones who stand in to defend Trinidad and Tobago. But we want them to do it in the right way. It have the ones who do the work. That's what I say from the past time, and I'll say it again. Not the whole apple is be bad. Not the whole bunch. It is always have one to spoil the whole bunch. And if it's a pinpoint and deal with the issues inside the dance, then therefore we should be in a better place. You understand? So this is my little front when I issue Trinidad and Tobago concerning about the young man Lennox Smith. I felt sorry, condolences to him. My heart goes out to him. And I wish that he can get some sort of speedy recovery and comfort to his situation. Because, I mean to say, that's his mom. And if he knows himself and he knows his mom more than anybody else,
why anybody should judge him and say, well, yes, his mother was so, and X, Y, Z. That is wrong, right? All he's crying out for is for the raw truth. And Trinidad and Tobago, we should give him that support, because it's very heartbreaking to know, you know, you lost a parent in a gruesome way like that. It is very, very heartbreaking. And we need to be, as you say, look out for one another. Because at the end of the day, you see something, say something. That woman could never climb that height of that tree. Common sense made before book. Right? Whoever did that person wrong, trust me, the day will come. And that goes out to everybody who has facing lost a family member in whatever way. It is very, very sad. Just remember, when you do somebody something, it is going to come back 10 times worse than what you did to that person. Pray for forgiveness and beg and plead and ask God to forgive you. Because let me tell you, every wrongdoing is being written down by the real judge and jury. So just remember that. You understand what I'm saying? He's hurting and he's hurting very bad. And he's in a lot of pain as well. So you can see what he's speaking, Lennox Smith. At the end of the day, people have to learn to understand each other in this country. And once we can understand one another, we could be a better country. As soon as you think about it. That is the reason why on the 20th of April going of this year, our right-thinking citizens in this country did the right thing and get rid of the corrupted, dirty-minded, past, wicked administration. You understand? So thank God, Trinidad and Tobago think going to restore back soon as possible. Lennox Smith, I don't know if you can talk to the Minister of Health to ask them if they can look into the Shogunas Health Facility, which is, we need to get a permanent space for Shogunas Health Facility. Reason being to that, Trinidad and Tobago, when you go to the Shogunas Health Facility, you have to be looking for parking on the road. And that is wrong. Down to the staff and then don't even have places to park the vehicle when they come to work. So we asking, please, whenever that could, it was on the main road side, now it's into the back of the Shogunas road, which is like on Ramsaran Street. Whoever knows where it is, they will understand what I'm speaking about. There are no parking facility at all. Not even for staff or family, for patients that come into the health facility. It is rather bad, right? And the areas are very small. So we just pleading to our great political leader, our Prime Minister. We're not rushing anything, but this is one of our requests from the Central Zone, which is from Shogunas. Right? As you say, so far so good. And to whoever feel it to rush this government, back down and think again. Because it was never like from before and it's not going to be so again this time. You hear what the woman and lay her cards and say? What was in the past was in the past. Now it's present. So we're dealing with the present situation. And she ain't going to take no push around. She ain't going to take no bubbly thing from nobody. Where they feel like a girl come and just push you around and tell you to do this and do that. It ain't going to work. So they think about what they're doing. Because this is not from the last administration. You understand? So, Andy, as we say, we pray for speedy recovery for you. And Trinidad and Tobago is missing it because at the end of the day, you know there's a thing going. And Lennox Smith, we know you have it pumping too because you're the man at the back of man. And the man with the big word. You understand? You just break it down and let we understand from beginning to end. So thanks to you all. And Mickie Kerr, wherever you are, you know, God's blessings and guidance with you all. So this is my little small something here, Trinidad and Tobago. You don't know, with one people, one nation, one love, unity is the code. And at the end of the day, ground report is with breakfast in the morning. Locked on and listening. And it's that.
Yeah, could go ahead now there, Lennox.
Yes, indeed, of course. And that was a very dynamic and a very expansive but very realistic presentation by the last caller. I want to thank you, of course, for all of the commendations, inclusive of the commendations that you would have made. About, of course, the elements, or should I say, the presenters of the ground report. But of course, I would expect that the Shogunas Borough Council will also be taking note as to what is transpiring on the ground as far as that health facility is concerned, and the parking inconvenience. I don't know, because I know that in the Port of Spain experience, for example, no parking is made available, but people have to, of course, do their chores. Sometimes that sometimes appear to be deliberate so that the wreckers can, of course, get a harvest. I trust that that is not the case in this case, and is the lack of parking accommodation. I suspect that on the compound itself may not be fully utilized in that regard, or there may be some prohibiting of parking, and maybe that might have created a situation where there's an overlap. And if you have sick people coming to the facility, walking a distance from where you have to park, especially if they are driving themselves, may be a bit challenging. That's all I'm saying. I don't have all the facts, but we trust our, what I consider to be external correspondence, such as the last caller. That being as it may, I want to say as well that at that forum where the Prime Minister presented her maiden address to the world at the United Nations in New York, I want to say too that one cannot help but observe the presence of the opposition leader there as well, Penelope Beckles. And a person like myself, who maybe over the years has become a unique observer of the characteristics and the personalities that would have either graced or disgraced, depending on your perspective, public office at the highest level. I'm talking about the political level. I see a similar pattern in previous leaders that this particular opposition leader is pursuing. We had the situation where uninvited, I'm not saying that she was not invited to the United Nations where she was, because I, for example, would get an invitation to the Inter-American Development Bank, of course, meeting where, of course, NGOs and other stakeholders will be invited to discuss matters that will feed into the substantive discussion in the substantive meeting of the heads of the various regions relating to that bank. So I am very familiar with how these meetings are structured. They normally will have a pre-forum where, of course, other non-heads of state, etc., are able to participate. So I understand that. But the point I am making here is that we have seen a pattern of conduct of the opposition. When the PNM is in opposition, they literally, of course, impose themselves. I'm talking generally here, because I don't know the details, as I said, and I'm not going to say that she was there she was there uninvited or for a reason that she ought to be there. But the point I am making is that the conduct is a similar conduct and pattern to what we saw of PNM leaders in the past, when they impose themselves in meetings or in celebrations or in fora where they weren't invited, but claim that they are citizens of Trinidad and Tobago and therefore just show up without an invitation, which of course in more circumstance than less or none, you normally will get an invitation. I recall very distinctly when Manning, of course, went into Diwali Naga exercise without being invited. I remember that as well. Manning would have gone to a radio station. Somebody was commenting about some conduct of him, and he went, of course, there as Prime Minister, in fact, and on that particular occasion, not as opposition, and of course gave a tongue lashing to such a person. I remember as well that a police officer who, of course, under the notion that he is doing his duty, spoke to, I think, the entourage or the outriders of Manning's escort that would escort him to and from the diplomatic center. And that person, because they believed that they were doing their work, Manning made an intervention, and next thing I understand that the guy lost his work. I'm saying that there is a behavioral pattern. And of course, when we look at Innsbruck, for example, when he became the Minister of Finance, Rambaran, the former governor of the central bank, applied for a job, I think is with the either the IMF or the IMF or the World Bank, one of those multinational institutions of a financial nature. And he wrote what some conclude to be a poison letter. Poison letter. It didn't matter whether or not Trinidad and Tobago would have had to go to the same institution to get some kind of financial assistance, one way or another, technical or financial. And that there is, of course, a Trinbagonian there at the highest level that could probably work the system. I don't want to say influence in any negative way, but work the system in order to get for Trinidad and Tobago what they, and easier than if there were no representative of Trinidad and Tobago at that forum or fora. That's the point I am making. But he wrote a poison letter only because the man politically been appointed by the previous then UNC Partnership Administration. He thought it was significant enough to throw rice in the man's, or to throw sand in the man's rice, to poison his chances. And of course, we saw at the end of it all what transpired. He took the government to court for, as indeed I see that the present governor of this, the present recent governor of the central bank, Kerr, is now, of course, making arrangements to take the present government to court for breach of contract, among other things. And amazingly, among the relief he is seeking in the High Court, if it reaches there, is a reinstatement. A reinstatement, I mean, come on, I mean, that and a pink donkey you'll never see, but he puts that in there, suggesting to me that, I mean, the man seems to be paranoid with the position of governor of the central bank, because, I mean, I don't see how he expects to go back there and the court making a decision to force the present government to replace Larry Hawaii, who has replaced him, Kerr, an appointee from the PNM government, to go back there, utilizing, of course, the processes of justice and the mechanisms that are used by the courts in order to come to a decision, one of which Kerr is hoping that the court will say, reinstate him. I could understand if they say a breach of contract, because he had a little way to go based on what he says transpired. Of course, there's two sides of a story, so the courts will hear the other side, the government side. But the point I am making is that then Kerr went to the not Kerr, but Rambaran went to the court on the basis of breach of contract, and he was compensated. He was awarded damages, it is called, of over $5 million for breach of contract, essentially. Why am I saying all of that? And why am I making a case for a pattern of behavior, a modus operandi? You see, Penny went up to the United Nations as well. And of course, taking selfie with, of course, the Prime Minister of Barbados and that of St. Vincent. And of course, you know, that is designed for domestic consumption, domestic political influential consumption. Let us not get away from that. These people do that not by accident. It's always to try to get into government. But the overall view, consensus, if not unanimous, but certainly consensus, is that these people believe that government is their place, and Trinidad and Tobago's government must always be the PNM. And that is why they are emboldened and why they conduct themselves in such a way. You saw them with respect to the sudden love for CPEP workers and URP workers and forestry workers. You saw it. No such affection was displayed when they were in government by these very players who are now claiming that they love those persons who would have been affected. I am certain, of course, should I say, not permanently, temporarily, but they can't wait. They're pouncing on every opportunity to build into the psyche of the average gullible Trinbagonian, and of course making a mockery of the idea that when the UNC wins, everybody wins. I hear it on almost a daily basis right around here. Right around here on George Street, Nelson Street, etc. But by persons whose agenda it is to be a PNM focus, as well as would have been satisfied, brainwashed into believing that only the PNM can manage the affairs of Trinidad and Tobago. And the leadership, the 12+1 in opposition now, are giving that impression. So her presence in New York and the telegraphing back to Trinidad of taking selfie with, of course, prime ministers of the Caribbean. I think both of them, by their utterance and their conduct, really are at variance with the present Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Kamala Persad-Bissessar, and therefore it is not by accident, I say, that Penny would have taken those kinds of pictures to telegraph back to Trinidad to somehow sanitize, justify the incongruent or the anti-Trinidad and Tobago argument that suggests that the present administration is promoting a zone of war or potential war and not a zone of peace. And as I said, lacking all of the ingredients, lacking all of the cogs, lacking all of the variables, lacking all of the nuances.
Let's take a call here, please, Lennox.
The zone of peace.
Good morning, my brother. This is your boy Carnage.
Hey, go ahead, man. Sorry about that. Yes, go ahead.
Lennox Smith, that scene with Penelope Beckers there, Lennox, she went up there to everybody know what, right? What them trying to do is to pressure the Prime Minister and she administration to make it look like she ain't doing nothing and she ain't care about the people, she ain't working for the people, and that everybody knows she went up there for the Prime Minister. You understand? Everybody know that when Rowley was there for 10 years, any part of the world, Rowley ever go in any world meeting or to meet any world leader, and you see Ms. Kamala Persad in the same program or in the same gathering, going up there on behalf for anything, she gone out there to scout, to mind people's business. That's what she went to do. But Lennox, I want to say congratulations to the Honorable Prime Minister for taking the stand that she take, and I still, and not me alone, the lot of right-thinking Trinidad and Tobagonians who understand what take place for the last 10 years will support the present administration and support the Prime Minister's view on what she is doing. I want to say something again, Brother Lennox. You see the policeman who lost his mother? I share sympathy with that. You know why? It appears what we see about the crime in the ghetto. But the crimes and them that committing within, we not seeing about it. Because if that one of us and go and ask for help to find the mother. And if you follow that piece of information, the woman was in a certain place and she said she wasn't feeling well. And she leave to go home. And the brother showing you now the tree that the mother was on. The woman is close 70-something years. Watch the tree that the fauna hang. Watch how the bush lay out. Watch how everything. That comes like the same thing. I want Mr. Guevara, I respect you. Thank God. I want to congratulate you for your first 100 days in office. I want to also say to the Homeland Security, Mr. Rhoda Alexander, please do what is right within. It has 2 murders that take place in Tobago, where a 70-something-year-old man was shot by a police officer, and it appeared that got under the carpet. It appeared the youth man was in handcuffs, and he was shot by an off-duty officer, and it appears that got under the carpet. So when Trinidad and Tobago citizens are seeing this, and this kind of thing taking place, they will ask themselves questions. You understand? We will ask yourself questions. What it is taking place? So, Mother Bonnie, seeing that you are there, that Pleasant, good morning to you at Tobago, I would like to find out what it is going on with that case, please. The 2 murders what take place in Tobago, I would like to find out that. But again, our Prime Minister and this administration right now, yesterday was 5 months. 5 months they're in office. Yesterday, Sunday was 5 months they're in office. So if all you want things to change, and then after next thing I want to say to you, brother, I want to ask you a question this morning before I leave. Lennox, what is a deficit budget, Lennox? I would like you to lay that for me before I leave the phone, please. Thank you.
Go ahead, Lennox.
Yes, because as I said, I'm always amazed with the level of knowledge of the callers, and I'm one that will always listen attentively, and of course, where there are clear deficiencies, that's the only time I will come in, or I may come in as well where there is a need to add something to reinforce the statement that would have been made by the caller. So I want to tell the caller, yes, your commendation of the Prime Minister is well placed. I think the concern that you have with respect to what has transpired in Tobago, and of course, as a previous caller did, concern with respect to the tragedy and the trauma, really, that young police officer would have suffered consequential of the death. He believes it is there is foul play within, and of course you have identified some of the areas that he had outlined to suggest foul play, while of course officially his co-workers, he happened to be a police officer, happening to be a police officer as well, have concluded, which of course he believes merits at least further investigations along the, should I say, the lines that he would have suggested. I mean, that is how it goes. In the absence of physical evidence, well, the physical evidence in that case is that she in fact died and that she was found hanging, yes. But there are other, what I consider to be latent evidence that may still have to come to the fore based on the assumption made by the son as to who the mother was, and to him, and clearly they would have had a close relationship, because I can't see a man giving up his career for that if there wasn't some emotional bond to the extent where he prefers, because of his disappointment, to sever his ties with the institution that he would have worked very hard, trained under, in order to at least put food on the table. Because he was asked the question, where would you go now? And of course he says he leaves it up to God. I think that was a wonderful statement, because you really don't know where you will end up in this life. I never thought I would have been talking to you every morning or every night several years ago, but that's how it is. All right, so let's get back to well, of course, I think I've concluded my assessment as to the reasoning why Penny would have been in New York, and I know too that she would have taken advantage of her time spent as the ambassador, provided or courtesy Dr. Rowley when he was in office. And of course, we know that one of the reasons for Rowley sending her there was largely to, not that she may be the best person fit for the job, but because he didn't want any competition at the time and challenge to his leadership. And of course, history has shown, evolution has, of course, dictated that she, in spite of his efforts, she is now, of course, the political leader of the PNM. Whether that is good or bad, well, of course, time will tell. But what we know for sure is that her conduct and her presence in New York at the timing with the General Assembly of Leaders at the United Nations, of course, no doubt, is designed to telegraph to Trinidad that somehow she probably was representing Trinidad and Tobago's views. I'm sure that there are those who would come up that view. But let me disabuse. Let me, of course, decondition. Let me tell you that that is a fallacy. Only Kamala Persad-Bissessar and her delegation would have represented Trinidad and Tobago officially there. Of course, as I said, I, from time to time, would be invited to certain fora of an international nature. But in terms of, and I'm from Trinidad, so she could be seen, Penny could be seen as someone from Trinidad, happened to be the opposition, having some speaking engagements, and maybe participating in one or two discussions. But in terms of formal and in terms of representing the government of Trinidad and Tobago, only one person and one person alone. The Honorable Kamala Persad-Bissessar, current Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. Very important that we understand that. So it has nothing to do with Penny, whether she's there or not at her own expense. Well, that is irrelevant. Let's continue. So, as I was saying, the regional corporations have claimed that no money was given to them out of that. As I said, that is something, that aspect of it I will be looking at. MSJ criticizes the PM's speed. MSJ criticizes PM's speech at UN. Well, of course, MSJ and they really are truly looking for relevance, have nothing to do, and therefore his radical disposition on whether it's Cuba or whether, of course, is Venezuela, we know from time to time that leftist agenda that the leader of has always advocated, not to his benefit or his parties or his organization's benefit, because of course he took that position into government to the previous incarnation of the Kamala-led government, and he simply left. Those who were dependent on him, he simply left them in limbo, left them in the doldrums, and gone. So you have people who are naturally self-destructive. Well, I believe David Abdullah is one of those. Robbery suspects slips police. Well, all right, there's another robbery. I think about 2 murders or so over the weekend or just before the weekend commenced. I think about 2 or 3 murders. I think there's something in Tobago as well. I think the Mr. Kainaj would have referenced that as well. All right, another important issue that is making the news as well is Mariano Brown warns Trinidad and Tobago's credit rating at risk. Well, as you know, Trinidad and Tobago, I think, was moved from stable to negative by that rating agency. RNP, I believe it is. Well, yeah, they said that, of course, the ability for us to raise funds, but they still gave us a reprieve. They said that in 6 to 2 years time, 6 months to 2 years time, they may be able to take a look and reverse their position. But it is, we have to be real. It is worse than what was, as I say, from stable to negative. So that is bad. That rating agency. We'll hear what the other rating agencies say. But I want you to bear in mind that by and large, that would not have been the operation of the economy. In essence, even over 100 days of the present administration would not have been the result of policies and programs of the current government. That assessment would have been as a result of what would have been inherited. To be fair to the present government, when the next review comes around, S&P, when the next review comes around, then we can make an assessment and the attributing to policies and programs that would, of course, either encourage, initiate, or cause growth and advancement, as opposed to further deterioration of our economic circumstance, and therefore our ability to borrow, our ability to utilize the Heritage and Conservation Fund, or the size of our reserve. In other words, those macroeconomic variables on which such an assessment is usually made can, in essence, be ascribed over the next 12 months, and I'm talking 12 months after the passage of the first budget of the present Kamala Persad-Bissessar-led UNC coalition of interest government. That's the point I am making. So the present assessment of stable to negative can be attributed to the last administration, because by and large, you would have only had just over 100 days of managing that. And then, of course, inside of that, you had a supplemental budget. And then inside of that, you also have the end of the budgetary year that you have to treat with. So therefore, the fresh slate, the new page, certainly will begin, or would have been turned, when the next budget, the first budget, that happens to be the first budget of the present government, next month, some say around the 6th of October, whether before or on that date. The fact is that from there, we can now monitor it through the impact of whatever policy emanating from the budget. But of course, in the context of immediate, medium, and long-term management of the country's economic space and affairs. That's the point I want to make. You have to be very meticulous. I'm on air now, so I'll finish at 9. Yeah, all right. That's a call from Toko, so I had to take it. So the point I am making is that those who following the Mariano Brown position, and of course the former minister in the Ministry of Finance position, are talking about the Manning. Yes, they are glad that of course that there is this negative outlook, but you must be able to be discerning and attribute the position. And if blame is to be projected it is projected where it is right so to be. Right so to be. Outside of that, you'll be doing a disservice not only to yourself, but to the government and to, of course, Trinidad and Tobago. Let's see what the first complete year of a budget presented by the present government would bring in terms of the assessment by S&P, Moody, and other rating agencies about the performance and the prospects of the Trinidad and Tobago economy. Right? So I want to make that clear. So when you are reading, read into it as well those factors that you may not factor in, except to see it as raw data and raw confirmation without, of course, understanding the timeline that is now required to give the present administration the leeway, the space to have their programs and initiatives manifest itself in such a way so as to impact any future assessment of Trinidad and Tobago's economy by these rating agencies. All right, so there we have it. Of course, Pleasantville, man, 38 gunned down. So I was making the point about 2 or 3 murders over and entering the last weekend. All right, ex-cop shoots 2 men in Aruka. So you see, so I think I don't know if that's occurred there, but I think the cop might be in hot water, because I think it was a situation where you have to be so careful. It's a situation where, of course, I think it's a neighbor, the ex-cop, of course, a licensed gun, licensed fire, was of the view that the neighbor's car was being stolen, and he shot. From my interpretation of it, the car was moving from its place of park, and I think people got shot. And I think from the way the article ended, it looked as though it may have been, in other words, in my assessment, friends of the neighbors who had a right probably to move the vehicle. So you see how that is important. And it reminds me of the situation where there was a neighbor in Tobago who pulled his gun as well, thinking that a knocking or inordinate noise that was being made on his door or his neighbor's door, a fire, and of course shot a gentleman who turned out to be a person who has difficulty in hearing. And therefore, when the person who did the shooting probably made some noise or called out, and the person didn't hear, and that was because of a hearing impairment. You see the hot water that person would end up in. I think he was an ex-cop as well, if I'm not mistaken. All of those can be verified, of course, by simply Googling and updating yourself on those matters. So that is where we are in terms of some of the issues. Don't forget, of course, our technical person in studio. If you would like, we can probably take some of the voice notes at this time. Don't forget, of course, the number to get your voice notes in are 326-4450, 236-4450. That is the new number, unfamiliar to most. But of course, if you're new to the program, well, certainly this is the number to call for voice notes recording at this time. It may change, of course, when Andy returns, but certainly this is the number, and you can call us in from that number as well. And the other 2 numbers is on your screen. You can see it there: 225-6644. 225-6644 and 239-5120. 239-5120. So make your calls now, or if I didn't get an indication from the technical person that is at studio, in studio, then I'll have to continue. Am I getting
You go ahead,
Identification?
Lennox, we have no call. Go ahead.
we have a caller? Go ahead, caller.
Oh, we don't have any call. You go ahead and you make a contribution.
Oh, go ahead. All right. Okay. So you're still having. All right. People have not called in terms of the of that innate or not another sufficient amount. Remember, of course, so we conclude at 9 o'clock. We have reverted to 9 o'clock. We got the opportunity to continue to 10 o'clock recently, largely because and courtesy the magnanimity and the appreciation of Gael. That has come to an end, and as a consequence, we are no longer on Gael. So those of you who missed us and who don't know where we are, well, of course, I am depending on those persons who know where we are to tell those who they know, maybe having difficulty in finding where we are, that you tell them that we are on YouTube and Facebook. Of course, you have to log on to what? To Real Media TT, and of course, the Corridor Transformation as well. We have a link with, of course, Real Media TT, and you will get the ground report on a daily basis as usual. You may have heard Andy making reference to the possibility of returning to mainstream media via, I think he may have hinted, but was not specific. And I will be similarly ambiguous. I wouldn't be specific either, but to say that we may well be back on mainstream media, and that in that regard, we have a duty and responsibility to ready all the callers, regular, irregular, first timers, etc., to tax regulation and the fact that there are certain words you cannot utter. That will, of course, be an infringement of the concession that was provided via the only concessionary entity and that is responsible for the issuance of radio, television license, etc. All right? So we say that we'll use this period leading up to when that occasion occurs to practice and to encourage, of course, callers to use words, whether in your voicemails or in your direct physical calls, to make sure that it is tempered in such a way. Yes, you may be angry. Yes, you may be emotional. But there are always words that, in all of those circumstances, would be acceptable, palatable, because the argument that would be making and have made, if those of you who were listening to the reading of a letter that was sent by Tat to Gael, yes, to Gael, is that children are listening. And you can't want a better argument than that. To have children listen to big people utterances that may not engender good attitudes, good feelings. So be careful, in other words. All right? So robbery suspect slips, yes. Where we are going again, of course, the Trinidad and Tobago economy shrinks by 2.1%. Maybe we should take a read of that because it would have been in concert. And of course, you know, I like to tell people, you read something here and then you read something of a nature that may have a connection to that which you read yesterday. You have to put two and two together because that is what logic and common sense is all about. And then you could have a better picture and a better, let's say, assurance and a better firm understanding of the topic that you want to express, having, of course, read several pieces, and you are able to put the pieces together in order to make a cohesive whole, and therefore make an argument that is irrefutable. Let me put it that way. So let's read from this. The Trinidad and Tobago economy shrinks by 2.1%. Why am I reading it? Because, of course, S&P says that the Trinidad and Tobago has moved from stable to a negative outlook, according to their assessment. So in that situation, let's see what this article and how this article will impact on our conclusion, our understanding as to the report of S&P, Standard and Poor's. So that is a rating agency that rates all countries, well, most countries of the world, and they look forward to because it determines whether or not you could borrow money, but if you could borrow at all, at what rate. If your economy is flagging, they then of course give you a rating that when the borrowers approach the lenders, they say, no, your economy ain't going good. So therefore, according to S&P, because they're looking at the S&P report, I say, no. So instead of getting a 2% interest, you may get a 4% or 7% interest because your economy is not is not reliable. Let me put it that way. Even though, of course, at the end of the day, countries do pay back their money unless, of course, that they are owing, unless, of course, they get some kind of debt relief, which, of course, is part and parcel of the whole process of making sure that economies across the globe sustain its people, because that is what the economy is all about. You saw the disaster in Sri Lanka recently, and I think another country recently as well, in terms of a collapse of its economy, quite apart from Venezuela. Yes, we know Venezuela, but certainly, I think it was one of those countries that is close to India. I'll get it to now in a while, but certainly Sri Lanka is probably the most modern, where the entire economy collapsed because S&P, and they say that they do not worth, the dollar do not worth, the money do not worth the ink that it was printed on or printed with. All right, this country's economy contracted by 2.1% in the first quarter of 2025. And this is coming from the central bank. Central bank figures reveal with declines across both the energy and the non-energy sectors. So we see the reason why that decline has materialized. It was a development the bank's monetary policy committee cited when it left the policy repo rate unchanged at 3.50% on September 26th. So that's just about 2 days ago. Here it is, the central bank is stating that the economy has contracted 2.1%. There are certain measures or measurements that will make an economist and those persons who are versed in these matters indicate whether or not an economy has shrunk. We will go into that maybe in some future time, but there are very specific ways that they determine that. And of course, the repo rate is the rate at which, the percentage rate at which the central bank, lend money to the commercial banks. That the repo rate, it is called. All right. So the article continues. The central bank's economic data pack for September 2025 reported energy sector output fell 4.8%. Year on year, meaning that it fell 4.8% year on year, meaning that compared to last year, the same time, you see that this year it shrunk, it fell lower than what transpired last year. That's what that statement says essentially. So 4.4% year on year in quarter one, while the non-energy sector contracted by 1%, underlining that the downturn was broad-based. So they are making the justification for the 2.1 decline in the economy in the first quarter of 2025. All right, it means therefore the first quarter of 2025, if the quarter begins in January 2025, it means that the PNM would have been in office, not so? The first quarter would have ended January, February, March, thereabout. So just before the new government came into office. The central banks, right, these declines, the bank said, were reflected in a mixed performance across petroleum and related industries. Crude oil output posted a modest increase in April. So, whilst the campaign was going on, oil posted a modest increase. But by and large, the first quarter and this 2-point-something decline would have been as a result of the economic policies or the management of the economy by the PNM. That's not waste time. January, this government came into office on the 28th. Why am I saying that? Or why did I say, of course, you read something one place and then, of course, you read something the next place and you can now, of course, coalesce. You can now get a better picture. Well, you now understand why it is that S&P would be saying that the Trinidad and Tobago's performance is not as healthy as we would have liked, and therefore they further downgraded Trinidad and Tobago. That is the reason you're seeing now in this article why that occurred. And you understand why I would have also said that the present government's first budget is ahead of us next month, and give them the full 12 months to be able to change the policy and redirect resources to generate ostensibly growth, and hope that there will be a reversal at the end of it all of the outlook enunciated by S&P, moving from stable to negative. All right? So let's see if it will move from negative to stable and to positive under the present UNC and the future growth and or projections, policies, programs, fiscal and other budgetary arrangements over the next 5 years to bring Trinidad and Tobago to a place where S&P can no longer look at Trinidad and Tobago and say that they could downgrade it to where it is today. Inflation is subdued. Inflation, of course, is a macroeconomic indicator to show the situation, mainly with prices, and of course it has an implication for the cost of living, because inflation really is a situation where you pay more for less, or put another way, you pay more for the same goods that you go in the market to buy yesterday, and when you go today, more you pay for it. Well, that is called inflation. So that is the inflation we are talking about, inflation. And of course, the data shows, the data pack showed headline inflation, meaning food inflation, at 1.4% year on year in August 2025. Unchanged from 3 months earlier, while a measure of core inflation, which of course is the general inflation, or put another way, except with the exception of food inflation, because food inflation by itself is considered to be a measurement and a separate, what I consider to be focus by economists and central banks and so on, that is called headline inflation. Headline inflation is equal to food inflation, cost of food. All right. Right, of course, the other, anything without food would be considered another kind of inflation, which of course is what I indicated earlier. So core inflation rose modestly to about 1%. So you're paying a little more still in that period that is under consideration. The bank noted that the food inflation eased as vegetable prices declined, even as wholesale and building material prices recorded modest increases. So again, you see the movement of prices that determines and is the basis for determining the inflationary rate and situation of a country. The committee highlighted as uncertain global backdrop, including geopolitical tensions and uncertainty in trade policy, and said that recent movement in international yields following Federal Reserve shifts have fed through domestically. So America influencing, of course, the impact on prices. Essentially, that is what they are saying. The Fed Reserve, they increase their the position on loans and so on, interest rates, they increase it or they decrease it depending on the situation to try to, of course, deal with inflation and at the same time the cost of a US dollar. The bank noted that the domestic 3-month Trinidad US Treasury spread narrowed in August from earlier in the year, a development that, together with government's financing operations, has affected liquidity. So I think we could pause here, because really and truly what this article is saying is that we are in a financial bind. Liquidity, meaning that the availability of money is not as fluid as we would like. And so, of course, that would have contributed to the slowdown in the economic performance of the country, and thus recording 2.1% a decline in the economy. And if we take, maybe it might be useful to take Mariano Brown's position, read some part of that to mix it in with what we know of what SMP said, what we know here in terms of the central bank's position as to the deterioration of our economic circumstance, and maybe we be able to come up with an argument. But you see, why I am very skeptical about using Mariano Brown is because he is not a totally objective, let's say, professional, because he comes across at times as having a particular bias, because the article, for example, which indicates his comments on the economy, let me just get it here. It says Mariano Brown warns Trinidad and Tobago's credit rating at risk. And that statement by itself tells me that he's sounding pessimistic, and may well, of course, color some of the expectations, or reinforce some of the negativity that certain elements with political agenda may want to see Trinidad find itself. That is why. But just for academic sake, just for information's sake, let's just read about 2 paragraphs of Mariano Brown's statement of credit rating and the risk, having regard to what S&P has said about Trinidad and Tobago's outlook. Mariana Brown, once again, of course, warns Trinidad and Tobago's credit rating at risk. And he says as follows. Former Minister in the Ministry of Finance, Mariana Brown, has expressed this concern about Standard & Poor's, S&P, assessment to which hints at a possible downgrade of Trinidad and Tobago's credit rating if government does not take action within a particular time frame. So we said earlier that S&P said that 6 to 2 years, we will look at it again and see. Because they recognize that it may not be the government's fault, and they're giving them some time, of course, to put their own policies in place, even though that may not be a sufficient time. But certainly, at least, you could have an indication as to where they are going. Of course, those who are pessimistic, like, of course, the former Minister of Finance, are talking about Manning, he would say that somehow, I don't know what is wrong with these people. Somehow, the Revenue Authority, because it was scrapped by the present government, somehow would have been the panacea. Trinidad and Tobago would not have found itself in that situation. And it's a good thing, people. We read that the evaluation was really an evaluation that would have been associated with Manning and themselves when they were in government, he and Imbert and they. It's a good thing we read on this program, otherwise we are learning to believe that somehow over the last 100 days, S&P, 100 days, S&P decided to assess Trinidad and Tobago. No, that was in the making long time ago, since last year. All right, so let us not waste time. So it's a good thing we were very meticulous and cautious as to how we treat with these matters that are coming to us. Because the opposition will certainly try to allocate blame to the present government that has nothing to do with the economic policies and the downgrading that is the case now as to with reference to the report of Standard & Poor's. And here we have Mariana Brown making reference to it. But being a little more sober, I would think, than a person like Manning. But Manning has the audacity, the temerity, and the dunderheadedness, and of course the obtuseness to tell people that, listen, because the government did not want to engage the Revenue Authority, that S&P has given, of course, a stable to negative grade. No, that has to be attributed to the PNM. Has to be attributed to the PNM. When the present government makes its first budget, and of course, after a year or so and going down the road, let S&P then rightfully, the present government will have to accept the fact that if S&P and Moody's and others are saying that the economy is shrinking, then they know what they have to do. But at the same time, they will have to take responsibility. But no, Manning and them don't do that. Before they say that, of course, that would have been because of the policies and programs of the PNM past. And if S&P says that, it means that they have to pinch themselves. But no, he wouldn't say that. He says that because the Revenue Authority was scrapped. What the hell? The Revenue Authority wasn't even existing. It was not existing, people. You have to be angry to see how they will take you and try to make fools of you and to insult your individual and collective intelligence. That's what they do. Revenue Authority was not existing when they were in office. And then, of course, they will make reference as well to the property tax and say that here it is that the present government has foregone based on an election promise. And that election promise was since when? That was since 2010, you know. So there's a consistency in terms of property tax. Of course, they will be implementing a particular tax which they had indicated at the end of their 2015 term or at the end of 2015, at the end of the 2010 to 2015 term, they were saying they will bring back land and building taxes. And I will not be surprised if that is mentioned in the budget to come. Land and building taxes, a tax that is this is different, distinct, and far from that of property tax. And what is even more dishonest of the PNM and its minions and its advocates is this: that the very PNM in 2015, coming into office under Rowley for the first time, said that they would have ignored property tax, that it was a dastard tax, that it was an impediment, that it was derogatory. Yeah, because Rowley said that when he wanted, back in 2008, thereabout, when he wanted Rowley's, when he wanted Manning's position, I'm talking about Patrick Manning's position, he said that none of his residents in his constituency, none of them could afford $100. But I want to tell you, he has implemented if he had his way, and did in fact implement it, because we collected about 100 and something $1 million from it, he would have implemented a tax where at minimum, the person that is subjected and have property as assessed would have to pay $500 at minimum. Have to pay $500, people. But he could not have when he was opposing Patrick Manning in 2008, 2009 to get where he ended up, the most incompetent prime minister. He was saying that none of his burgesses, none of his constituents could afford $100. 100 people. Don't forget that. I am referring and talking directly, of course, to those CPEP workers that they are trying to exploit at this point in time. Those, of course, URP workers. At the end of the day, there will be a replacement. This government says what it means and means what it says. And I was telling you on the basis of property tax, here it is. They said that there will be no property tax back in 2010. Almost 10 years elapsed after they were out of office and get back into office, and they have dismissed and rescinded property tax. Unlike Rowley, Rowley agreed in 2015 during that election at the Hyatt. I don't get me vexed before somehow I find a way to play it for you to hear him. He and him speak. He said in uncertain terms that the property tax will not to be a consideration of his government. And he went further. That is why I could say with confidence that I will not to be surprised if land and building taxes are brought back in the budget of the present government. Because he, Rowley, in agreeing back in 2015 at the Hyatt in front of diplomats who were witnesses, apart from Trinidad and Tobago, the entire population that were looking at that PNM event leading up to the 2015 elections. Rowley acknowledged the same Larry Hawaii, who is today the governor of the central bank, was the Minister of Finance under the Kamala Prasad partnership government in 2015, up to 2015. He, Rowley, said that Hawaii said that the government then would be reverting to land and building taxes and indicating in no uncertain terms. There had to be no rocket scientist to understand that. It don't have to be suggesting that they would do away with property tax and revert to land and building taxes, which was a tax that was there before they came in to office. I'm talking about Kamala Persad-Bissessar in 2010. They're going to revert back to that because they were always opposed to property tax. Rowley said that he was opposed to property tax in Manning administration, of which he was a part, leading up to the 2015 general elections. And becoming prime minister, he then now reneges, believing that we're stupid and making a different argument that somehow that will be for what? For the financing of regional corporations. And that is why they bring it in. But he didn't say that then. As distinct and opposed to Kamala Persad-Bissessar and the UNC that said in 2010 they will not study, they will not encourage, they will not implement anything called property tax. She said the same thing in 2015 as well. She lost the elections in 2015. She lost it in 2020. And the same thing she would have said, no property tax. She eventually wins it in 2025, April 28. And one of the first gestures was, yes, the dismantling. Of course, because it was legally implemented, it means therefore you must have a legal mechanism to rescind it. And that has or is being done. But in the meantime, property tax was implemented by the Rowley administration, and I have no difficulty if the present government says, well, nobody will get a refund. No problem with that. Because we on the ground report was saying that the government will change. And therefore we were advising people, don't go, but it was the law. It was the law, and you went. Well, you did it at your own risk and peril. But at any rate, I don't think anybody should feel that that money should be reimbursed to them, having regard, of course, to what we were told. But we have a government whose integrity cannot be questioned, if only on the basis of what they would have said and the consistency thereof, and being constant as the Northern Star and as immutable as a steadfast change. As far as property tax is concerned, and if they are consistent there, then it means therefore every other thing follows. But if you have a poison fruit that is, of course, that of Rowley and the PNM, lie, 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 and implement that which they said that they will not. Another lie. You know that the entire tree is poison. Whereas you have the salubrious, you have the benign, you have the people-centered, you have the not necessarily populist, even though many of the policies and programs will be liked by the population, but I am not seeing this government taking lightly decisions that has to be made. And they're going to not do it because they want us to like them. What you could be assured of, that what they say they will do, including the 10% for public servants, including that, yes. Eventually, as we have already seen, the rescinding of the property tax, and of course, the very bothersome and troublesome Revenue Authority.
We take this last call before we go.
We have this call, a final call. All right, we have a final call. Go ahead, caller.
Lennox, this is a talk show or call show? Half an hour I waited.
Right, caller.
You only talking.
Lennox, you go ahead and close up if you want to. I switch you off, Lennox.
Yes, because of course I have been asking all the time for people to call in. If you're not calling it, yes, it is a talk show. I had to talk. Where you feel it is, you feel it's a music show. I mean, come on, man. You get to know like when we get that in a show, on a talk show. Yes, it is a talk show. The thing about it is that you have to call, and as you call before you have an opportunity to make a contribution. You're asking me if it's a talk show. Well, we're calling for it. Yes, it is a talk show, and we expect you to talk. All right? But don't ask me if it's a talk show. All right, that means that certainly he spoke as a person who is trying to be facetious and probably playing smart with foolishness. People, of course, we have come to the end of the program. Of course, what's the time now? Time now? 8. We just have about a minute or so. It was nice doing it for you. Remember, of course, don't forget tomorrow morning, don't be surprised if Andy is not here. He is recuperating. We continue from 6 o'clock, and we are doing our utmost to make certain that all is even keel, all system goes. But that's how it is, and we have to be able to. You're saying what?
I say I will be here in the morning, so we have no problem.
Okay, you'll be there in the morning. Beautiful. Thank you very much, of course, for substituting. And don't forget, of course, tonight, the corridor transformation will be on. Yes, we have our children's segment, just about 15 minutes, and then, of course, we go on to big people matters. All right. Have a wonderful rest of the day. God bless, and see you tomorrow morning when the ground report will continue with these and other matters. Trust that you had a wonderful and informed this session, in spite of or in the absence of Andy. I too miss him, but that's how it is.